I'd like to invite Monica Ramirez, the founder and president for Justice for Migrant Women, to the podium. Please give her a round of applause.
I want you to take a moment, close your eyes. I want you to think about where you were and what you were doing when you got the news that the country and the world was shutting down because of COVID-19. During that time, across the country, the farm worker community that I come from and the farm worker community that I serve was in the fields around this nation laboring. They were laboring to pick strawberries and artichokes and so many other fruits and vegetables that we rely on. They didn't get the news at the same time that most of us got the news. As people around the country and around the world sat confused and terrified, wondering what would happen, realizing for the first time that maybe we had a problem. Maybe there might not be enough food. The grocery store shelves were bare. People were paying outrageous amounts of money to buy things like produce, like toilet paper. Do you remember those days? In the farm worker community that I serve, as soon as I heard the news, I knew that we needed to create a fund because I knew that there would be monies needed to repatriate the bodies of farm worker community members who died during the pandemic. What I did not expect, though, in those days was receiving phone calls from around the country, not about what was happening with the pandemic, not about not knowing where to get masks. I got some of those calls, but the calls that I didn't expect to receive was the calls that I got from the farm workers who worked all day picking blueberries in Florida and in different parts of the country, who told me that there was no food for them, who told me that they did not have food for their children, who told me that despite working 10 and 12 hours a day, they did not know how they were going to eat or how they were going to feed their own families. The Humans Who Feed Us is a project that I created after being given the opportunity to create an initiative. Right during that same time, Race Forward came to me and they said, we're choosing 18 activists around the nation to build narrative projects to help reframe how people think about and talk about immigrants in our country, including the immigrant women who I serve and who we serve through Justice for Migrant Women's work. And they said, we are giving you $10,000 to create something to help reframe the way people think about immigrant community members. And you can create anything. You can do anything with that $10,000. And so we created the Portrait and Narrative Project, The Humans Who Feed Us, because I'd heard too many times about the hands that feed us. Have you heard that? And every time I hear that saying, the hands that feed us, I think therein lies the problem. When people talk about the hands, but fail to talk about the whole human, we understand that we have a huge obstacle that confronts us. Because over time, throughout the history of this nation, farm workers and other people working in the food system have been dehumanized, have only been talked about and valued and thought of when it comes to what they have produced and how much they produce. And if you're an immigrant farm worker in this nation, often whether or not you're a good immigrant or a bad immigrant depends on what you do in the world, and in this case, what you produce. And so the Humans Who Feed Us is a narrative project that set out to make people think about the whole human, about people like Blanca, who's worked here in California for over 20 years with the dream of giving her family a better life. She came here from Mexico, and all she wanted was to be able to give her children the life that she didn't have. We tell the story of Claudia from El Salvador, who came to this nation and co-founded a coffee shop in Oakland in partnership with our good friends at Oakland Bloom. She created her coffee shop because she wanted people to experience coffee in all of its wonderful flavors in an accessible location, but most importantly, in a place and a space where they felt like they belonged, where they were welcomed. We honor the leadership of people like Rufy and Connie, a mother-daughter duo who created a chocolate shop. They created a chocolate shop so they could honor the tradition of their family's recipe of creating Oaxacan chocolate. You see, we have to tell the stories about Blanca and Rufy and Connie and Claudia and all of the humans who feed us so that people understand that they are people and they have dreams and they have vision and they feel joy and they're working so hard every single day for their families and for all of us. We have to tell different stories about people who are employed in the food supply chain, including migrant and immigrant women. See, in my family and in my community, we're often asked to talk about the most painful, the worst things that have ever happened, whether that be the rampant sexual harassment and violence that women experience in the fields, or the wage theft, or being sprayed by pesticides and having children that are born without limbs. We are asked over and over by media, by society, to tell those stories. But our aim is to tell the stories of power, like Maua, of resilience, of hope. You know, during that scary period, I had a conversation with a farm worker in Washington State, a leader, and he said to me, they now think we're essential. It was a great moment of pride. He felt seen. But during that same period of time, those community members were contending with anti-immigrant rhetoric, anti-immigrant policies, anti-immigrant sentiments that were harmful and continue to be harmful. Earlier, we talked about the laws that need to change. We talked about the importance of unionization, and thank you so much for your work. But we also have to talk about the fact that farm workers in our nation, with the exception of states like California and New York, farm workers in our nation have been excluded from the most basic federal protections under the Fair Labor Standards Act. Still today, more than 80 years later, farm workers do not have the basic rights that all other workers in this country have. Farm workers across the nation, with the exception of a few states, do not have the right to organize and become part of a union. We have to name that because it isn't a lack of interest. The law prohibits it from making it possible. We talk a lot in spaces about the importance of doing the work together to figure out how we're going to help one another. Trust me, I have been an activist since I was 14 years old. I've been doing this work, I know I look very young, but I've been doing this work for a long time. And I've been in lots of rooms like this where we talk about how we together have to do better. As a daughter of migrant farm workers, the same conversation has happened literally for decades. And nothing is going to change unless we actually decide to take collective action and use our power together. The people who feed us every single day, whether it be the farmer or the farm worker or the restaurant worker or the truck driver or the grocery store worker, people who in large part, in my opinion, remain invisible in plain sight, like the workers in Aspen, where I have a festival, a Raizado Festival. One of the reasons I created that festival there was because there were so many BIPOC people in that community who are literally invisible in plain sight. And thank goodness for Maua, because what Maua also didn't say when she was up here is that she has multiple restaurants now, and she's a James Beard Award winner. We need more people like Maua leading the way, just like we need Blanca, and we need Connie, and we need Rufy, and we need all of these incredible leaders across our country to have space and a place and rooms like this where they know that people like you and me are going to keep fighting every single day until we actually see justice, until they're finally recognized as more than just the hands that feed us. Thank you.